Hello, everyone. I am Karen Rosen, Meeting and Events Planner with CML. Thank you for attending today's webinar. For those of you who are elected officials who have registered, you will receive one university credit. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website, www.cml.org, under training materials within the next week. For those of you who are not familiar with the webinar format, you should see a control panel up at the top right of the screen. You have an orange arrow to the left of the panel, which will minimize the entire box. All participants will be muted during the webinar, but you're encouraged to ask questions by typing them into the question box on the control panel. We're going to hold a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to type the questions as you think of them throughout the presentation. Our presenter today is Nina Bodenhammer with CityGive and the City of Fort Collins. Nina, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Welcome and thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, all. My name is Nina Bodenhammer, and I am the inaugural director of the CityGive for the City of Fort Collins. And CityGive, to start with a very broad umbrella, is a centralized service for charitable activities within the city. It's innovative, it's pioneering. We have been learning along the way. We began in 2019, and I'll walk you through how we landed on this model. And there are a lot of moving pieces, right, to both the municipality and charitable giving. And CityGive is bringing those pieces together so residents can support the mission, the services, the programs that the city offers that they find right for private investment and charitable giving. So in the big picture, CityGive, our goal was to shift municipal asks from reactive to proactive. And what we found in the city of Fort Collins is, let's say a capital campaign. We would launch our plans for a build of, a renovation of our senior center or a performing arts center. And there is a place in the charitable landscape for municipalities, but the city of Fort Collins was never equipped. So we had passionate, fabulous residents that would drive those campaigns. And yet we knew we could do better. So our vision began with what would it look like? So again, I have here in the slides, and I do recognize that it's a lot of text, but I wanted to make sure that each of you have kind of all of the pieces of kind of how we've been thinking about charitable giving as it interfaces with a municipality. So I promise there's a lot of text there, but I'll stick high altitude, and then during Q&A, we can probably kind of unpack some of that. But CityGive simply is this pioneering vehicle to align charitable activities with the city's mission and services. It is a very, very strong process of financial accountability and governance. And that's kind of one of our founding principles, that for us to really honor donor intent, we have to be able to deliver a transparent, reliable financial process for all charitable gifts. We also have, of course, community and donor relations as one of the legs of our stool. And then we also work in partnership with community fundraisers. So our friends of groups, or sometimes just passionate groups that have an interest, a special interest, and want to advance something that's within the city plan and either add to it or expand its service. But all of our campaigns do align with the city's plan and priorities, and that becomes very important. CityGive is not, we're not a foundation, we're not a separate 501c3. We don't make grants into the community. And most importantly, CityGive is not a vehicle to bypass the budgeting process. We want to make sure that we do not approach donors where we are asking for programs or services that are outside of our city plan, or for those programs and services that didn't get funded by the budget, and we still want to pursue them. So there's some guardrails there about all of our charitable activities align with, again, the mission, services, and budget of the city of Fort Collins. So Karen, if we'll go to the next slide, I'll share a little bit about how we got here. So in 2019, we launched a community audit, a listening session, and we reviewed all of the historical charitable gifts that the city had received, which was really hard to track down because every department had a different way of coding those gifts. So we really collected a big list of what does the community want from us? What have we done well? And if we wanted to continue with charitable gifts as a part of the municipal service, how would we do that well? So in our audit, what we heard from donors, actually, our largest kind of comment was I get a call from one department and the next week I get a call from another department. They want different things, but they're not talking to one another. So that was something that we have to really focus on in this orchestration. We had donors or residents who wanted to support, let's say even they'd read an article about our urban canopy and they wanted to support our urban canopy, and they would reach out to a department, and sometimes we're told the city doesn't accept donations. So that was something, again, in our kind of room for growth. We also heard from regional foundations that giving to any municipality is very hard to do. We heard that charitable process was just dependent on who you contacted at the city. Some departments made it very easy because maybe they had experience in charitable giving, and some departments would accept the gift, but then there was no follow-up, or they would accept the gift and then there was no reporting. So all of these pieces we put into one bucket and addressed how can we create, again, a one-stop shop, an orchestrated, enterprise-wide service for charitable giving. And that was the beginning of CityGive. Karen, our next slide, please. So again, a lot of text, and I apologize, but this actually highlights really the four main lanes of CityGive. So most importantly, it's governed by kind of our charter, what we've created, and it's simply an in-house approach to philanthropy. What we heard from donors is that municipalities have a valid role in the charitable landscape. We also heard from nonprofits that, don't create another 501c3. We don't need someone else in this lane. So we're sticking very much to our lane of municipal mission and services. Then what we layered on top of that is the financial process to accounting and to accounting for charitable gifts. And this is our real backbone. As the director of CityGive, I report to the CFO. We've created a transparent, reliable process for every gift, regardless if it's a $25 gift from a resident who received exceptional service or a $200,000 gift from a foundation. It's the same process. And how we've done that is we created a separate business unit. So all charitable gifts touch the same business unit. I see them, I plot their path, their department, I work with the donors, the departments, we appropriate that unanticipated revenue, and then we move it over to the department. But it gives me a line of sight into all giving. So then it's, what do we raise money for, right? And what we raise money for is as important as any other aspect. And that we actually have a process in-house now that starts with departments reaching out to me and saying, I have this project, I have this program that I want to expand, and I work with them on the viability, the what ifs. What if we don't raise all the money? Is this actually an appropriate ask of donors? Because that's critically important within a municipality. Again, are we making the right ask of the right donor at the right time? So I serve as the single point for departments to come to me, and I meet with them. We work on these fundraising asks, and then all of those asks advance to City Hall, and that our city manager as home rule, our city manager, our CFO, and our assistant city managers review and prioritize. We want to be very cautious about that. We are not seeking charitable funds as a way to backfill our budget. We're not seeking charitable funds to relieve any budget, gaps or crisis, but we're making very intentional asks where donors play an appropriate role. A great example is we are currently renovating our historic Carnegie Library to a full visual arts gallery. It'll be the Carnegie Center for Creativity. We have an enormous capital commitment within our budget, and there's opportunity for philanthropic funds. So Carnegie was a nice, easy, capital campaign for us to build on in the community. We build all of the materials, the ask, the budgets, everything that is required in best practice philanthropy. So that fundraising portfolio, again, is what I operate from. And that leads us, of course, to external, donor, foundation, and community relations. So again, like any other capital campaign, I do the fundraising feasibility. I work with the team. I'm not the only one out in the community doing asks. The city of Fort Collins has 2,400 amazing colleagues. So the kind of spheres of influence of who knows who has a relationship with donors, with residents, with foundations, with friends groups. All of this becomes a part of our community relations. And that really kind of is the wraparound for City Give. So it's these 4 functions are something we've all had to check in place to, again, make sure that we're I operate on a principle. If we accept the check, can we deliver, an accountable, can we deliver on the donor's intent? And that is my goal at every step. Karen, our next slide. Thanks, Karen. So in that philanthropic umbrella, as I'm building a capital campaign with a department or maybe a programming campaign, our urban forest is one of the kind of items in our portfolio that I'm always fundraising for. We have that campaign is entitled actually Share Some Shade. So all of these campaigns, again, in a best practice industry standard, they appeal to different donors at different levels. And that's part of my role, is kind of influencing who are we asking and for how much. Again, the right ask of the right donor at the right time. And what I've learned over a career in philanthropy is that giving comes in many forms. That I have this experience in knowing that gifts can be a check or a disbursement from a donor advised fund. It's a unique role in a city to be the one person with that full range. So to be honest, I spent a lot of time teaching. And this is one of my fundamentals, the slide we're seeing right now, which is what is philanthropy to a municipality? And that, so inevitably once a week, I'll hear a department say, well, I want to apply for a grant from a foundation, but that's not a donation. And it's like, it is. So any unanticipated revenue that's a transfer of assets is a gift. So one thing we work on is making sure our language internally and our vocabulary aligns with the industry. So charitable gifts are, again, they can be gifts from businesses, from financial institutions. They can be checks that come from Fidelity, from a donor advised fund. It can be a check that comes from Charles Schwab as a part of an IRA transfer. So there's an incredible amount of work in our organization right now to fully recognize those gifts. Our finance services are not centralized. So our parks department has a very different team of finance individuals and professionals. Our planning and zoning has a different team. So my job is to make sure all of those teams If a check arrives, they recognize it. And the easiest thing, I just always say, just call me. So we have these checks that arrive. And again, when deposited, they come into the dedicated business unit. Also, foundation awards are part of this charitable space. And these are grants from their language. And in our language, they're grants as well, but they're the foundation grants, family foundations, regional foundations, corporate, all of those that are typically arrive via a grant. And that can be on very different degrees of process. It can be a standing responsive grant, like the Gates Family Foundation in Denver. It can be, actually, oh, no, I was thinking of El Pomar in Colorado Springs, which we just submitted an application to for our Carnegie Creative Center. So foundation awards fall under this umbrella as well. Event sponsorships also fall under CityGive, while they're unanticipated revenue for us, and they can be declared as a charitable deduction from the giver side, and that becomes very important. And tax receipting is part of the role in the finance function. And if I haven't said it yet, it'll come in a slide later, but I should just start with this group. Gifts to a municipality are tax deductible. So in this first column of checks from individuals, if a resident writes a $500 check for any of your work, it is a tax deduction. And the IRS recognizes municipalities as a public charity. So we are not 501c3s, we are 170c1s. And gifts to a 170c1 is tax deductible. So we have a standardized receipt that we issue. With event sponsorships, it's a little more nuanced because there's a benefit exchange. So if you have questions with sponsorships, I'm happy to answer those. But sponsorships for our kids in the park, in our 4th of July activities, we solicit sponsorships. So again, I manage that relationship. I manage the gift, the receipting, all of those pieces. The teams handle the marketing, the benefits, the co-branding, the radio spots. They actually do the deliverables. I manage the back of the house finance. And then we have non-cash donations. And this is a really interesting aspect for municipalities. I didn't expect it. I bet each year I'm brokering 1 or 2 really large real estate transactions under the charitable arm of CityGive. And the simplest kind of example is, let's say our department, let's say our natural areas is eyeing a piece of property they want to acquire. And the seller has an asking price that we cannot compete with. What kind of the relationship here at the City of Fort Collins is our natural areas will bring me in. I meet with the seller and help them structure what the tax benefit would look like. So maybe the city pays, $2 million and they donate $1 million in value toward this purchase. Sometimes it's called a bargain sale. I tend to be very careful with that language because the IRS has a different process for bargain sale. So this is actually a charitable deduction for the seller. And then I process the IRS paperwork that's needed for non-cash donations. But non-cash donations, it can be as small as, a copier. It can be an artifact that someone wants to donate for historic, prosperity. It can be mineral rights. It can be water rights. Whenever we're that lucky, I have brokered those here in the city of Fort Collins, but of course, Colorado, we'd all love to broker water rights every day, right? In terms of a charitable gift. So those non-cash donations require much more time, but it's a very legitimate space for a municipality. And again, even those all come through my dedicated business unit of CityGive. So that's the range. You'll notice what I'm not including there are federal and government grants. And those actually are all handled by my colleague who does grants and grant compliance. And that is a very different kind of process. Some similarities on the beginning. You know, are we asking for the right thing? Are we covering our direct costs? Do we have our eyes on the compliance and the deliverables? But again, government grants are in a different bucket and they don't fall under my domain. Okay, that's the range of gifts. Let's see what I have on the next slide. This is my, oh, questions already? There's so much I have to talk about. I often say I have the best job in Fort Collins, certainly within the city, because I get to be on the front end of talking with our residents and donors and foundations and partners about this opportunity and this very unique ecosystem. And again, while it's unique, we're seeing more and more of it. Part of the reason that we created CityGive was at the time, my mayor at the time, Wade Troxel, was participating and working alongside Bloomberg in one of the Mayor's Challenge. We received one of the awards, but at the time, Mayor Troxel was also participating in the Harvard Leadership Program through Bloomberg, as our current mayor, Art, has also participated in. And that is where this question of what role does philanthropy play in a municipality first bubbled up. Our then mayor, Troxel, was also, his career is on the university on the campus of Colorado State. So he had exposure and interface with philanthropy and put these pieces together and said, why are we not actively engaging in this space? And if the city of Fort Collins were to engage in philanthropy, what's the right model for us? And that is something that in the questions we can talk about. I can't advocate that every municipality stand up a CityGive, but there's still so many options to participate in philanthropy. You can use a fiscal sponsor. You can partner with a community foundation, which we have on a number of projects. You can partner with mission-aligned partners. So there's a lot of ways that a municipality can strengthen its muscles and learn how best practices govern asks and campaigns. So again, for us, we see it as one more tool in our toolbox to fully deliver to our residents the full range of desires that they have. As we all know, resident desire and just even kind of our need for municipal services will always outpace the budget. And then what? And in that space, it's part of my job is to go through those kind of needs that are either partially in the budget, not fully covered by the budget, or outside of the budget, and explore the philanthropic feasibility. So, and that's a fire hose of why we created CityGive and how it functions. But I also know that not only is that a very high picture, I find when colleagues reach out to me, every case is so different. We have municipalities in Colorado that, you know, they want to fund one thing, pickleball courts, or they have a friends group driving a campaign, or they have, again, one donor that, you know, wants to kind of create something. So how we move around all of those asks are nuanced. And that's why, of course, I'm looking forward to the questions, and I'm always available to provide any insights if I have them for those questions that you may have. But that is my big picture, my fire hose of CityGive. I'm a believer. I'm a believer that we've delivered on donors' intent, that we've created a space for donors regardless of gift size, and that we can honor both our commitment to taxpayers and merge that with donor intent. So I love what I do. I believe there's a space for philanthropy with municipalities, and I look forward to any question you can toss my way. If there are questions, let's see.
Okay, thank you, Nina. Right now, we do not have any questions, but maybe you want to talk a little bit more about, the city of Fort Collins is fortunate enough to have a separate office, City Give, but for smaller municipalities who may not have that,
Yeah.
what are some steps that smaller municipalities can do to kind of achieve some of the same results that you are achieving?
That is such a valid question. And I also think it's a great place to begin. So the first place to start at any given time is, what is it you're seeking funding for? We have a tendency to seek funding for what we need and not what the community can support. So that is the first step of, what is the need, kind of what's the ask. So if you start with the ask, and let's say it is, because I have had a question about, I think, was it parks, about a park. So if it's a park renovation, so that is municipal service, right? That's us at our best. So let's say there's a municipal park renovation. A municipality has a small amount of money, not enough money to do it well. And you say, okay, we want to raise money for this. So you can accept the gifts, but if you say, we're going to run out the door and we're going to start writing grants and we're going to ask donors and we're going to ask our local bank, the first question is, who's holding that money? And if a municipality isn't comfortable in holding that money, though to me, a smaller municipality, it could actually be easier to create a fund. But if no, then it's who holds the money. And then I would go and look for a fiscal partner, someone who is in this business. And this can be, again, a community foundation. It can be a nonprofit that's aligned. So it can be a friends group that's a 501c3. So if a partner is needed, if it's the municipality, my first piece of advice is really map out the finances. How much money has to be raised? Who's going to, what's the charge for holding the money? If someone else is holding the money, what is their role? And I love a good MOU, a memo of understanding. If it's a partner, community partner, you want to make sure all the terms are defined. My experience is, in the beginning, everybody's on the same page. And then they raise the money, and that's where it starts to get difficult. People are like, well, but now we want to add this to it. Now we're really hoping to let's say add an exercise obstacle course. Well, that changes the budget, right? So we just want to make sure all of those terms and deliverables are as crystal clear as you can possibly get. The other piece is, to me, is the time it takes to raise money. It's never fast. I bet I sit in a meeting every week where someone says, oh my gosh, everybody wants to give money to this. My experience is, people don't always want to give money to what you're asking for. It's always easy to talk about other people's monies. So if I'm in the room and I'm hearing, we're going to raise $2 million for new pickleball courts because everybody wants to give money to pickleball courts. Well, we have a lovely percentage of residents that play pickleball, but we can't ever assume that they are experienced givers, that they have, discretionary income to give. So we have to kind of park those assumptions about philanthropy and know that there is research that guides it. Typically, you can expect that to raise money, for every dollar raised, you're going to spend almost 20 cents. So that's kind of just the national kind of percentage breakdown. So if you need to raise $2 million, you can quickly think about how much money you're going to need to spend. And that's in staffing, making the asks, materials, all of these components that are required to raise money. There's also some other really standard formulas you can look at. If you need to raise $1 million, there's some projections. You will need a gift you'll need large gifts that cover almost 70% of that. So if you're raising $1 million, you're going to need a $250,000 gift or grant. You're going to need a $200,000 gift. So knowing kind of how to maneuver through those philanthropic skill sets is critically important. And I find if you are a smaller municipality and you have this great project and you just know it's right for philanthropy, get some professional input. Just some early projections about how much time, how much it's going to cost you, and who are your ideal prospects. So partnering for one project with a community partner is such a fabulous way to start. And again, there are lots of nonprofits out there that will either align with your mission or also serve anyone who's working to raise money. I just always want to make sure, again, what are you paying for that? Fiscal sponsorship, can cost from 2% of dollars touched up to 12%. So you just want to know on the front end, because also donors have a right to know where is their money going. In what I would consider the unique situation of CityGive, my salary is covered with by the city of Fort Collins. So I can guarantee that 100% of a gift goes toward that project or program or service. And that's a very unique situation. You just want to be transparent. Donors aren't always, I find donors are incredibly generous when they understand what you're asking, so I just no hidden fees is kind of my approach. So that's a beginning place. And again, I think that what we all learn at any time, we've had a number of campaigns that happened prior to my arrival at the city that were successful, and yet at the end, they get really sticky. Again, residents wanted something else. Maybe our fiscal partner had a different vision. And what we heard from donors is after they gave, they never heard from us again. So that's one piece that we're really working on, is if you made a gift to the city 10 years ago, I want to make sure that you're still hearing from us about not only your gift, but what you accomplished, what you helped us accomplish. So that donor relations piece is also equally important.
Great,
Karen.
thank you, Nina. We do have one quick question and an ask, and was wondering if you can provide a copy of the receipt that you give out that shows kind of some tax exempt. And then if you send that to me, I will make sure that I send it out to all the attendees.
Yeah, I sure will, because that's one of those things. I was stunned when I arrived. We didn't have a template on file. And it's really simple, our EIN number, but I'll share a copy because I also like to soften it. I don't want it to sound like you just paid your parking ticket, So I will share an example, cut and paste. The important things for both the donor and the IRS is the statement of two things for a municipality. One, that no goods or services were exchanged. So we're not selling anything, we're accepting a gift. The second is municipalities as a public charity, so like a school or a hospital, we can only accept charitable gifts when they're used for public good and services. Well, that's what we deliver every day. So so that's a line in the receipt that's very important, and I will share it. And then I'll share two, Karen. So one is for a cash gift, and then I also have a receipt for non-cash gifts. So when someone arrives and this is a really important one for non-cash gifts. As I encourage staff, first ask, do we want it? Because I'm sure, as y'all know, the city can quickly turn into the dumping ground for everything that people want to give away, and we don't want it. So our first question to the department is this something you want? And if it is, great. Then we say yes, and it's on our end, it's our responsibility to determine the value. The IRS doesn't let the donor determine the value. And a great example of that is I did have a gentleman who wanted to donate a beautiful old phonograph, a beautiful system, an old, just a it was Victrola. It was gorgeous, but his value was like $12,000. Well, Google told me that the average value was actually more like 600. So when you write a tax receipt, just know that it falls to the writer, the initiator, to declare that value and defend that value if you're ever audited. So, or if they're ever audited, more likely. So, Google, easiest way to declare value. You're looking at what would it cost to buy something like that. So I will happily share both a receipt for charitable gifts and a receipt for non-cash gifts. One last statement there for non-cash gifts. If the value is over $5,000, you actually need an independent auditor or an independent appraisal on that gift. So we had 2 beautiful calves donated to the city because we actually manage a working farm, the farm at Lee Martinez, which is beautiful. So this family donated these 2 prized calves. Well, as each one was, their value, it exceeded $5,000, which stunned. So anyway, you just need a separate appraisal. And by letter of the law, that appraisal has to come by an independent party. The city can't give it, the donor can't give it. So non-cash, 2 receipts, cash and non-cash, I'm happy to share.
Terrific, thank you.
Also, yeah, and also just by letter of the law, we're responsible for keeping all copies of all receipts, all grant records, kind of all charitable transaction receipts for 5 years. So in my finance function, that was another thing that I did, that I created a kind of a common space to house all of those receipts by year on our internal drive.
Excellent. All great information and resources. Thank you. We do not have any other questions right now. So
okay. So I would love to, there's a few other kind of pieces that I always feel important when I'm talking about fundraising. And one I do want to talk about are friends groups. It's a question I get from a lot of cities. I believe friends groups are the silent force behind so much good, right? Their passion, their commitment, their willingness to serve is fabulous. And one of my roles is to also protect the city from special interests. When the city starts accepting charitable gifts, I find that there is a question about, is someone buying favor or influence? So hence again, why we've stood this up as a finance function, that there's a process all the way through the system. So every gift can be accounted for. And again, what they're funding aligns with our existing services. So there is no special interest there. But there's a few little caveats or a few little banana peels that I'd love to share with you. So our friends groups typically share our mission, right? So let me use our Friends of the Senior Center, the most lovely group of volunteers. So they're out supporting our senior center. They did create an endowment at our community foundation of Northern Colorado. So they raise money for the long-term sustainability. Fabulous. They also raise operating funds every year. So they write a check to the city. And what they love to do is they know they want to fundraise for a new speaker system for the senior center, which is great. And this may take them years, and I mean years, of pancake breakfasts, of events. They're out fundraising. Again, this friends group is such a valued asset, and I want to ensure clarity on all sides of the relationship. So one thing we've done is, with all of our friends groups, we have a memo of understanding, and it is our due diligence is, are they a certified 501c3? Are they delivering on the donor's intent? And as they collect funds and then hand them to us, are we honoring that intent as well? So the Friends group is one way that we, again, protect both their passion and the perception of special interest. They are not driving what we need. You know, if they jumped up and said, what we want to do is add a helicopter pad to the top of the senior center, we would say no thank you, because that's not in our range of service. So again, the MOU just governs that all parties agree to the same thing. The other piece of perceptions of special influence is that we kind of defined in our kind of guiding principles that the city of Fort Collins doesn't accept anonymous gifts. And that's just something we've dug in. We believe that anonymous gifts, they have a place in charitable giving. Some people very much want to give, you know, undercover, and that's certainly their right. Because we're driven by taxpayer, right? Kind of accountability, we do not accept anonymous gifts. So if I have a donor that says, I want to make this gift, but I need full anonymity, I mean, I just can't deliver that. So we say, no, thank you. And then my job becomes to pair them with a nonprofit that has a similar mission that can accept that gift. And then the other piece that we do as well in terms of this perception of influence is that once gifts are received, they always advance toward appropriation. Because it's unanticipated revenue, we need permission to spend that revenue. So in the AIS, you know, I don't like to really call the donor out. We don't have to list the donor's name, but we do list the purpose, the amount of the money received, and all of those go to council for appropriation. So again, we have a public process there that we feel really comfortable with to safeguard, again, that perception that we're accepting gifts and that those gifts buy you something with the city. So I can offer donors confidentiality, and the way we do that, and there's one space that we do it all the time. So our finance system is you know, everyone on staff can open that up and take a look, right? So when I have a gift that a donor has asked for confidentiality, or if it's a gift to, let's say, police services, I don't enter those names into the full system. I know the name, the finance team knows the name, the CFO knows the name. If it's a large gift that's asked for confidentiality, I do share with that donor that confidentiality we will work very hard, but as you all know, with Cora, I can't guarantee it. And I do believe our elected officials have a right to know who's giving to the system as well. So with a confidential agreement, their name does not go into the full record keeping system of the city, so other staff members can't look up who made that gift. We do a coding there, so it's confidential and we number them. And then we keep that list, you know, with the finance department. So we know, our council members know, if there are a Cora request, we would, you know, provide that information. So I can provide some kind of privacy, can't guarantee it. So that's, again, it's all that finance function, right? It's can we, again, deliver on the donor's intent? And if the donor wants anonymity, that's not for us. The other piece, that since I just touched on council, is the question I get from municipalities is, what is the role of elected officials? And the role of elected officials, of course, is always, you know, support for operations. The city of Fort Collins is home rule, so our city manager governs City Give. And I also want to always be sure that council members know where and for what purpose we're soliciting money. But there is governance over elected officials soliciting gifts, and that's not their role. And the technical term is behesting. You know, our elected officials, legally, if they actually even ask for gifts to a nonprofit, they have to report and record that. So because of those sensitivities, we've just kept a nice separation, and our elected officials, my council members, of course, they're out in the community with me all the time. They're supportive of the work we're doing, and yet they are not out soliciting money or advocating for the capital projects that I'm campaigning for. I bet that just opened up a whole wasp nest, right? I mean, we're governed by an elected board, so it's a really very respectful space that I want to maintain at all times.
Really important point, Nina. Thank you for including that. So, did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the group?
I always have final thoughts. Yeah, I'll say that I have, as I've been in this space for the last 3 going on 4 years, I will always have people who say, no one's ever going to give to a municipality. We collect taxes for that. And yet, every year at the end of the year, City Give, I'm moving around anywhere from, $1 to $4 million in charitable gifts to the city. So it does take place. I think in order for any donor, again, large or small, we receive large gifts. I can tell you my most meaningful gift is the family that steps forward and wants to write a check because, our first responders did something exceptional. So, so people do give and support our municipal services. And I think it's really critical to understand that there is a role, there's a very legitimate role for municipalities in the municipal space. Our obligation is to do it, with full financial transparency, according to best practices, industry standards for philanthropy, and create that space where passion and municipal services and donor intent can all coexist. And we can do it, we can do it well and honor everyone's intent and the letter of the law. And out of respect, just for our taxpayers too. Again, they're always our silent or not so silent partners in how we, fulfill our promise to the community. So balancing all of that intent and desire and process, I would encourage, if you're thinking about it, if you've had an experience before, absolutely reach out. And I'm happy to share our learnings, to share our templates, whether it's, again, a campaign for trails, whether it's sponsorships, whether it's building an endowment at your community foundation, any of those kind of pieces. If you want to step into the community, always reach out. I'm always available.
Nina, thank you so much for offering yourself as that resource. That is terrific. And I will make sure that I include your email in the follow-up that I send out to all of the attendees, which we will also include the PowerPoint and then the 2 receipts that you were gonna send to me. So if there is nothing further, we will give all of the folks participating on the webinar a gift of a little bit of time and go ahead and conclude the webinar. Thank you, Nina, so much for sharing your time today and sharing about City Give. It was really, really interesting, and I would encourage, those of you that are on the webinar, that if you do have questions, Nina is a great resource for that. So thank you all for attending.
Thanks, Karen.
This does conclude the webinar. The recording will be posted on the CML website in the next probably week or so, and then I'll follow up tomorrow with Nina's contact information and some of those examples of those handouts. So thank you so much for joining us today. That concludes the webinar, and have a good day.
Adios.
Okay, bye-bye.